Oh, hello and welcome to What Are We Talking About with Jamie Jakes. And today we are talking about the NFL Combine's use of the bench press. And the reason I bring this up is it feels more of like a tradition than an actual event at this point in the NFL Combine. Like seriously, when was the last time you heard an NFL GM actually reference a prospect's bench press as an actual reason why they like the player? Like you've never heard somebody say in the past decade, like, oh, we didn't like the player at first, but then he benched 30 reps at the Combine and we had to take another look at his film. Like, no, that's not something that you hear happening in actual NFL scouting circles. Like nowadays, you're more likely to hear an NFL GM reference a player's Madden statistics instead of their actual bench press at the real life Combine. Which brings up the point, why do the players even decide to do it if the NFL doesn't seem to care? And it's entertaining. It's a good way to get your brand out and your image out if you can do a whole bunch of bench press reps, but a lot of players are just deciding to not do this movement, especially in the skill positions. So let's look at the problem with the bench press in the NFL Combine and a few alternatives I have for it. Problem number one, it's not meaningful, and the NFL knows it's not meaningful because honestly, 225 for most of these NFL prospects are way too light. You're actually testing more upper body endurance instead of upper body power. Now, of course, there'll be a slight correlation, but just because a certain player can have the most bench press reps at 225 in the Combine doesn't necessarily mean that they have the strongest bench press in the NFL Combine. Now, we can debate if a bench press actually carries over to player performance, and I would say like a 1-rep max bench press maybe does a little bit, but the alternatives I have will give you a lot more information on the prospect. Number two, safety. There's a long history of players getting injured in the bench press going back several years. Most recently in 2019, Kendall Sherfield suffered a pec injury during the bench press. And I have taken that in consideration for my alternatives on my list. And number three, it's difficult to standardize the movement. When you're doing a 40-yard dash, the 40-yard dash starts when you pick your hand up or the first time you move off the line, and it ends when you trigger that laser when you cross the line. What an actual bench press is, you might be surprised to hear, it's kind of variable from athlete to athlete and even person at the Combine, judge versus judge. And I have a great example here. Let me share it with you. So this is Josh Simmons at his pro day, which is kind of important, an offensive line prospect for Ohio State University. I'm just going to let it play here. He ended up tying the number one guy this year in the bench press. And when what I'm talking about here with your elbows fully locking out, if you're not fully locking out your elbow, in my opinion, you're kind of cheating the movement and you're getting a few more reps compared to somebody who maybe actually did it at the NFL Combine. I mean, that's not even close. The record holder currently in the bench press, he wasn't totally locking it out, but I mean, this is kind of a bad look. Honestly, a bad look for the coaching staff. The training staff in particular. It's a very narrow grip. If anybody knows anything about bench press, if you're trying to do an AMRAP or like a max single set on the bench press, you'd really want to move your hands out a little bit wider. Maybe he's a little bit more tricep dominant than chest dominant or whatever. I don't know. But having a narrow grip like that kind of demonstrates that maybe the coaching staff doesn't necessarily know what you're doing. And Ohio State, why would you develop your players if you can just buy them anyway? Let's be honest. Anyways, moving on. Obviously not getting anywhere close. And you're like, oh, maybe it's an elbow mobility issue. Maybe the guy can't actually lock out your hand. And also, actually being able to lock out your elbow from here to here is very important in the NFL. We see it, especially in the offensive line. Getting from here to here can mean a big, big difference. It is very important. And if you're going to get into the comment section and be like, well, lockout doesn't really matter unless you're a power lifter, I also disagree with that. So he can, like I said, it's not a mobility issue. He can actually straighten out those elbows. And the rest of these reps are actually, I would say, pretty legit. Like a little bit of soft elbows. I'm not like a super stickler here. A little bit of soft elbows at the top of your rep. If you're doing like a max set of, 33, that's fine. But the reps that are ending right here, and this is really embarrassing. That if you ever see somebody pick their leg up on a bench press like that to finish their set, even if they are at maximum fatigue, everyone knows seasoned lifters keep their feet on the floor. It's actually a technique called leg drive. A lot of strength coaches call it leg drive, where you don't want to lift that leg up off the floor, and just the narrow grip, and that's a bad look. That's a bad look to anybody who's been in a weight room, in a college weight room. That's not something you like to see. That's something you see out of the freshmen most of the time. So I did say I would compare it to the current record holder. So here he is, Stephen Pea, repping it out. Now you can see he's got a little bit of those soft elbows that I was talking about, but he's certainly getting a lot more of that rep. Now you might also notice wide grip, like I was saying, so he kind of knows what he's doing. And he, stocky guy, kind of shorter arms. I don't know what his arms end up measuring out at, obviously, but he's kind of more built for bench press, which I think a few of my examples are going to test the athletes a little bit better than this. Their anatomy is not going to matter as much to get a good relative strength score out of these guys. So if you're like, Jamie, we need to keep the bench press in it, I would say the most simple fix, maybe not the safest fix, but the most simple fix, and the fix that will keep it entertaining, keep it like it used to be, and give us an actual kind of read on how strong these guys are, would be get the bench press weight from 225 to 315. That would give us a lot better idea of how actually powerful these guys are. Now, I would say that would very likely increase the risk of pec injuries if you do increase the weight like that. So that's not great, but if you have to keep bench pressing, I think that's how you do the simple, quick, and easy fix. Now, my favorite idea of the 3 ideas that I have would be a 1 rep max trap bar. Some people call them hex bar deadlifts. A 1 rep max would be simply the most entertaining and electric thing you've ever seen. Like, imagine, I always think about, I wish I knew the 1 rep max of this running back class. I imagine Omarion Hampton, Ashton Jeanty, Cam Scatabo, probably Quinshon Judkins could throw up some massive weight. We could identify any movement faults that they might have, but in a very safe and controlled environment. Some people might say like, oh, a 1 rep max, that's pretty dangerous. I would argue probably actually not. The hex bar deadlift, the way it's designed is your center of gravity is directly above the center of gravity of the object that you're moving. So it makes it arguably much safer than a conventional straight bar deadlift, because the center of gravity of the bar is a little bit forward out in front of your toes, which put more stress into areas like your low back. But I have to imagine it would be absolutely sweet to see the guys start at something probably be like 405, and then, hey, we're going to 455, and then we're going to 505, and we just keep on adding 25-pound plates until people can't lift it. The nature of this movement usually is if you can get it up off the floor, you'll be able to lock it out. So it's just like one of those movements where you're either doing an isometric pull from the floor or you're finishing the lift. So it's relatively safe, and I would argue it would be far safer than the 40-yard dash, where feels like we see groin, hamstring injuries every single year during. And I love this because it's very standardized. You either pick the weight all the way up or you don't. It's very obvious. You're not going to have any worries about hitting a standard. Like, for example, some people might say like a back squat would be even better. And I'm like, I agree with you. However, in a back squat, the standards are a little bit different. And even if you use a box, like, do you use the same height box for Johnny Wilson as you do for Cam Scatabo? Or do you do a knee-high box? It's a little bit tougher to standardize than just a trap bar deadlift, which is basically, a quarter squat, which research will actually show actually carries over to explosive speed a lot more than you think. And it's ultra meaningful. I'm sure if you pulled NFL scouts, would you rather have the information of their 1 rep max trap bar deadlift or their max set on a 225, like a sub-maximal for most of these athletes bench press? I bet you 10 out of 10 of the guys would be like, give me the 1 rep max deadlift. Let me understand how strong these guys' hips are and give me a relative ranking for their strength too. Like if a guy's a little bit undersized, but he has a 500-pound trap bar deadlift, I don't really mind about that lack of weight. He's got plenty of strength in those hips. Now, my final option, not my favorite option because it's not as entertaining. It's definitely the safest out of the 2 I've talked about so far. And I think it's really, really meaningful, would give a lot of information to the NFL scouts. Either a 10 or 20-yard sled push, 350-pound range, maybe different skill positions, push a lighter sled or a sled that's average of their body weight for their position in the NFL, something like that. So you can get a 10 and a 20-yard split. How powerful and explosive are these guys in a short period of time? How much power output can you put out on, in a unilateral movement where you're using both legs kind of at opposite times? Probably more beneficial to know, honestly, than the deadlift example that I demonstrated. But either of them, I think, would be really, really fun. I don't think would carry over to television. Wouldn't be nearly as entertaining. I don't think casuals of the NFL Combine would necessarily appreciate how fast they're moving the sleds, especially at first when you have no point of reference to how fast those sleds are moving. But it is meaningful and arguably very safe. We've already seen D-line drills where they use a sort of different type of sled, like a body sled that resembles a body that they push, instead of, like, I would say like a rogue sled would be the one I would be thinking of, where it's more of like a prowler. You're getting down and you're seeing how strong those hips and those hamstrings are. So those are my options. I would say honorable mention would be like a hang power clean or a power clean, or maybe like some sort of ball throw where they're jumping and throwing a ball forward to show how strong their upper body is in unison with their lower body. It would be all right, but for a lot of different reasons, I don't think really match this list of 3 that I think would be really, really awesome to see. Tell me if you guys agree. Do you think some of these are more dangerous than I've said? Do you think some of them wouldn't really actually translate to the NFL? And I don't know if you could really argue about the standards. I think it's pretty simple and clear based on what I've already demonstrated, that the bench press standards, especially at certain pro days, are a bit lacking. Some might call it a joke or a bad look for that strength staff. My name's Jamie Jakes. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. See you next time.